NCMHCE theories and techniques. Adlerian therapy acting as if. This is a form of encouraging and motivating clients to be the way they desire to be, acting as if the transition has already occurred. Adlerian therapy analysis and assessment. This technique is about exploration of the family constellation, sociograph of the individuals at home during the client's formative years, and early recollections, and is not about interpretations to the client. Adlerian therapy confrontation. This is used by therapists to encourage clients' responsibility, looking at issues of taking responsibility for how others respond. Why does my child yell at me? Because you allow him to. It is easier to give into a tantrum 8-year-old than to be the parent. Presenting existing alternatives. You don't have to work 3 jobs to bankroll your capable 28-year-old. You can set limits and refuse to be taken advantage of. What do you want to do about it? Taking responsibility for change. Shall we continue to talk about this or do you want to take action? And considering time, knowing what you know now, how long do you plan to wait to take action? 5 years? Adlerian therapy encouragement. Having a client be an active participant in treatment helps the individual begin to see themselves as capable. Adlerian therapy exploration of social dynamics. At the core, the therapist believes the client's issues are primarily social in nature. Adlerian therapy exploration of the family constellation. In this theory, birth order, sibling interaction, parent interactions, and the client's sense of their psychological position in the family are important to enhance insight about how the client has selected lifestyle. Family constellation is not limited to the immediate family, but rather to those present at home during the formative time of the client. In this theory, birth order, sibling interactions, parent interactions, and client sense of their psychological position in the family are important to enhance insight about how the client has selected lifestyle. Family constellation is not limited to the immediate family, but rather to those present at home during the formative time of the client. Adlerian therapy push button technique. This is designed to help the client see they are responsible for how they feel, both good and bad feelings. The client is asked to visualize a happy event, re-experience the associated feelings, then an unhappy event and associated feelings, and finally to return to the happy event, re-experiencing the happier feelings. Adlerian therapy reporting of the earliest recollection. Therapists ask the client to describe the earliest recollections, which often provide insight into the patterns or interpretations the client has made in developing their lifestyle. The client is given various tasks in their lives to assume responsibility for their own lives. Adler advised the client that he could be free of depression in 2 weeks if he follows a specific task plan of thinking daily of how to please another, with all of Adler's efforts aimed towards increasing the client's social interest. Behavioral therapy activity scheduling. This is useful in the treatment of depression. This is done with a chart using short word descriptions, 1 to 3 words, according to a hierarchy of easiest to hardest, including both necessary and enjoyable tasks. The client is to follow the planned activities and document any activities that were not pre-planned each week, rating the activities according to the level of pleasure until the client has resumed his or her normal schedule. Behavioral therapy, assertiveness, and social skills training. This involves the teaching of specific skills and tools to enable the client to act and interact with greater success. The mechanism for this is often modeling, role playing, and behavioral rehearsal. Behavioral therapy, behavioral extinction. A therapy technique where the client's rewards are removed to stop an undesirable behavior. Behavioral therapy, behavioral observation. This technique involves objectifying a specific behavior and observing the behavior in the client's natural environment. This is most common in institutional settings such as hospitals, schools, or treatment centers, where the clinician or others who can be trained as observers, for example, parents, teachers, aides, nurses, are present and can count or objectively observe and analyze the data. Behavioral therapy biofeedback. The client is given feedback about what brainwaves, sympathetic nervous system, i.e., heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tension, are doing to engage a relaxation response by the client. We provided feedback to the client's visual or auditory needs. Behavioral therapy chaining involves a series of smaller behaviors that are linked to the desired complex behavior. Each step is prompted and reinforced, strengthening all of the parts of the chain that move toward the desired behavior. Behavioral therapy diversion. When anxious, a classic technique is to help divert one's attention from anxiety both in the short term and in the long term. Longer term examples are things like physical activity and hobbies, and shorter term examples are focusing on the immediate world around you. Counting the bricks in the wall, looking for individuals wearing green or with red hair, inventing stories about the people around you are working a puzzle. Behavioral therapy, exposure therapy. This is a technique targeted for anxiety disorders involving exposure of the client to the feared object or the feared situation without any danger and for the purpose of overcoming their anxiety response. Behavioral therapy graded task assignment. This technique breaks larger tasks down into smaller baby steps and may be easily combined with activity scheduling. This is particularly useful for clients who have complex or complicated tasks with deadlines that are important for the client to achieve, for example, for work disability rating. Behavioral therapy guided imagery. This is a symbolic recreation of the problematic situation rather than simply talking about the issue. While imagining the situation is occurring, the client verbalizes thoughts that arise. Behavioral therapy hypothesis testing. The therapist and client identify an issue and set up an experiment to test the situation, as acceptance to the hypothesis nullifies the hypothesis. For example, if an individual believes they are unlovable and will always be rejected, the individual is encouraged to go out and seek approval after being given specific skills and tools for coping with stressful situations. Behavioral therapy modeling. The demonstration of a behavior either live, clip, television, or recorded source for an individual to emulate or imitate. Behavioral therapy physiological recording. An instrument monitors physio- psychophysiological reactions to objectively measure any number of problems. Behavioral therapy problem identification and assessment. The initial task is to have a clear understanding of the presenting problem, including initial occurrence, frequency, and severity. The therapist also needs information on what has been attempted to address the issue thus far, as well as any client thoughts about the problem. Behavioral therapy response costs involves giving a negative consequence for a behavior that is not wanted. Behavior therapy role playing rehearsal. This is an artificial engagement of a situation to allow for observation of the problem behavior as well as better assessment of the interpersonal issue. It may also be used to prepare for a situation as in rehearsal. Behavioral therapy self-control procedures, biofeedback, progressive relaxation, specific goals. This is a useful technique for addressing issues like impulsivity, excessive anger, insomnia, tension, headaches, pain and stress, and encouraging the individual to maintain a new behavior through self-reinforcement. Behavioral therapy self-monitoring. A client may be asked to keep detailed accounts of specific event or reactions such as not noting all caloric intake or the amount of time spent studying. Behavioral therapy shaping. This is a basic operant in which behaviors that approximate or move towards the desired behavior are reinforced. Behavioral therapy systematic desensitization. This technique is sometimes referred to as exposure therapy and is commonly used to establishes a hierarchy of increasingly anxiety-producing stimuli, teaches relaxation or other coping skills, and the individual begins with the least difficult situations and works towards the most anxiety-producing over time with the goal of neutralizing the reaction to the stimulus. Behavioral therapy thought stopping. This technique forces the self to stop thinking in an unproductive way, such as wearing a rubber band on one's wrist and popping the band as a method to assist in redirection of thought. A means of telling oneself to stop and ultimately to retrain the way one thinks and is able to redirect thinking patterns. Behavioral therapy token economy. Three elements are present, including one, tokens, a symbol for a valued item. Two, the backup reinforcer, for example, material items such as candy, services such as going to a sporting event, or privileges such as to get video game time. Three, a target or desired behavior being shaped or reinforced. Additional elements to the token economy may include social reinforcement, shaping, immediacy of reinforcement, token out for rewards later, planning ahead, i.e., saving tokens for a larger reward, and group contingency. A reward for the entire ward or class if the entire group achieves at a particular level. Brief therapy complement. An essential part of this therapeutic style is seeking to validate clients for what they are already doing well and to reinforce what the client is doing that is working. These may come in the form of a question such as asking how the client did something, thereby inviting the client to provide the compliment by answering the question. Brief therapy coping questions. These are questions that serve as powerful reminders of how the client engages useful skills and tools, even when overwhelmed. Example, how have you managed through this time? This is an alternative means of assessing the client's resiliency and level of determination. Brief therapy invites the client to do more of what is working. The therapist builds upon the client's strengths and invites the client to engage in more of what has previously worked or encourages the client to try something the client has raised as a consideration, sometimes referred to as an experiment. Brief therapy looking for exceptions. In evaluating the problem, there may not be previous solutions that have worked, but there may be an event or moment in which the issue was less of an issue. This technique seeks to find strengths in alternative experiences to build upon. Brief therapy looking for previous solutions. Clients often have solved similar issues or have ideas about the current issue. Questions such as, has this ever been less of a problem, or what have you done that helped elicit strengths and ideas on which to build? Brief therapy miracle question. This is a specific question designed to generate the initial steps of the solution, ones that can be acted upon in short order, perhaps the next day. The question proposes that a miracle occurs while the client sleeps. No one knows the miracle has occurred. The miracle is that the client's problem is solved and the client is to consider the initial signs they would know the miracle occurred. Brief therapy, present and future focused question versus past orientation focus. Brief therapy maintains a future focus, always leading the client to the present moment and the future, remaining in the solution and moving towards success, such as asking, what will you do this week that will demonstrate you are making progress? Brief therapy scaling questions. This type of question assists the client in assessing his or her situation and tracks progress, asking how a client rates an item based on a scale. It can also assist with clients who struggle with verbal skills. Any number of items can be measured, such as motivation, hopefulness, confidence, progress, anxiety, and depression. CBT behavioral experiment. The client experiments with experiencing, reflecting, observing, planning, testing thoughts, and discovery to target specific thoughts or behaviors under consideration for change or challenge. CBT behavior rehearsal and role playing. The client imagines a target situation, and the therapist guides the client through a step by step process of successfully coping with the situation. The client then practices the steps in a mental rehearsal in a variety of ways. CBD cognitive restructuring. This involves identifying, challenging, and changing faulty beliefs and distortions thinking through examining logic, testing the truth of the thought or belief, and finding alternative explanations. This commonly involves looking for the evidence of whether the thought or belief is true or false, with a logical analysis of evidence for and evidence against. CBT, the catastrophizing, sometimes called what if. When using this technique, the therapist will have the client state his or her fear of consequence of the situation and then identify strategies for coping. CBT decentering. This is helpful with anxious clients who believe they are the focus of others. The technique is to set up experiments that challenge the client's beliefs and assist them to see what others are not focused upon the client, but rather daydream, attend to children, drive, bite their nails, or whatever the situation discloses. To enable cognitive restructuring, clients are given this to reinforce learning through monitoring automatic thoughts and our behavioral activation, reviewing the previous therapy session, or preparing for the next session. CBT modeling. This technique involves demonstrating something to the client and having the client replicate the desired behavior. Subsequent role playing may be appropriate depending on the desired behavior. CBT problem solving. With this technique, the counselor teaches the client problem-solving skills, and an identified problem described in clear, concrete, goal-oriented terms is explored by generating solutions to the situation, evaluating each potential alternative for short and long-term consequences, and finally selecting a course of action and following up on that course of action after implementation. CBT Psychoeducation. This provides the client with information, education, or skills training on specific areas to facilitate change, such as parenting, obesity, smoking, or medication management. CBT Reattribution. This technique takes a situation and examines the automatic thought by considering alternatives for the event under consideration. For example, the client may see themselves as a cause of an event, right? He did not cause why the marriage failed, when in fact this is an unreasonable assumption because a single person is rarely the only reason for an event occurring. DBT redefining. This involves assisting the client in making the problem more specific, concrete, and individual to the client's behavior. An example is restating nobody notices me to I need to reach out to others. CBT self-monitoring. This is sometimes called diary work and is used to document the degree and amount of targeted thoughts and behaviors occurring between sessions or during a given event or time frame. CBT Socratic dialogue. This technique involves the use of questions to point out the client's maladaptive thoughts and stuck points. Primary categories of questions are clarification. For example, can you give me an example of what you mean? Probing assumptions, probing reason, or evidence. For example, what evidence supports your position? Questioning viewpoints or perspectives, i.e., what are the pros and cons of this path? Analyzing outcomes, i.e., what are the implications of making this change? And questions about questions, i.e., what would getting an answer regardless of the outcome be for you? CBT stress inoculation. This technique combines relaxation skills with self-talk, role-playing, rehearsal, and/or systematic desensitization to help individuals master highly stressful events or circumstances. The primary categories are one, preparation for the stressor, two, confrontation and direct management of the stressor, three, coping with the stressor, and four, reinforcement. CBT systematic desensitization. This involves a pairing of relaxation with exposure to something the client reports as stressful. The client is taught to relax in response to the anxiety-producing situation, altering the previously paired response. Contextual genogram. Draw this to determine the viewpoint of each family member, both those who are present and those who are not present, to discover legacies, loyalty, entitlement, and indebtedness issues. Contextual multi-directed partiality. This technique involves sequentially turning toward each member, including those who are absent for whatever reason, and providing acknowledgement and examining the expectations of each person. Emotionally focused therapy expands the emotional experience. When the client makes an emotional statement, for example, I feel out of control, the therapist will respond by asking the client to stay with the feeling, asking what it is like for them to be out of control, what it is like as they speak of it in the moment, and how they feel as they speak, how they frame the experience, how they protect themselves. If they did not, then what would occur? And finally, validate the client's responses of his or her experience, i.e., it must be hard to feel scared, and then direct the partner's family members to engage as indicated. For example, and you feel she cannot protect you, tell her what that is like. You cannot feel safe when he hits the wall. So, with the ultimate goal of pulling emotional expression that engages compassion and connection and meeting unmet attachment needs. Emotionally focused therapy, reframing the problem. The problem is reframed into a cycle so the players are no longer victims of the situation, but rather they are on the same side looking into the cycle. Emotionally focused therapy restructuring the bond. When using this technique, the client and the therapist will identify attachment needs and facilitate a change in interaction based on the identified needs to stop old patterns and engage in healthy ways. Existential therapy relationship. The role of the psychotherapist is primary in the therapy. Authentic integration of the interpersonal touches is addressed through the primacy of experience, specifically by the therapist not manipulating the client by offering how to adjust, overcome culture or otherwise adapt, which would deprive the client of genuine growth. Rather, the role is to guide through demonstration, to be a humble model of what is possible, and provide a sense of assurance that the quest the client seeks is worthwhile. Existential therapy using all techniques. These therapists borrow from whatever. This technique is required to facilitate empowerment of the individual within the context of the individual cultural reality. If there is a sense of disempowerment, techniques from the feminist theory may be used, for example, power analysis and framing. And if there is a strong extended family presence, elements of the following family system theory or general system theory may be used. For example, gender roles and promote high position. Family systems therapy detriangulate. So with the triangling, the triangle is the smallest stable relationship system, but paradoxically is the most difficult for an individual to tolerate because there is always one person who is on the outside. Bowen talked about putting the other with the other, meaning linking individuals directly with one another rather than having a third person, rather than having a third present to absorb the tension. It is imperative the therapist do the same with the therapist present, specifically not taking sides. Family systems therapy genogram. This involves drawing a complete genogram, sometimes called a family map, which looks like a family tree but is comprised of additional information such as emotional dynamics, marriages, divorces, significant events, over-involved relationships, distance, conflict, and cutoff. It is a snapshot representation of the family for the client, enabling hypotheses and insights, and the purpose and principles of the model are not withheld from the client. Family systems therapy I positions. The therapist continuously uses I messages to differentiate himself or herself from the individual, couple, or family. The purpose is to demonstrate the responsible versus irresponsible use of I. The first of which differentiates by defining one's own beliefs and values, and the second of which makes demands. For example, I deserve on my right. Feminist assertiveness training. This technique provides specific training and insight to raise women's awareness of their interpersonal rights, assist in transcending stereotype sex roles, and alter negative belief systems to change daily patterns, actions, and interactions. Feminist bibliotherapy. When using this technique, the counselor encourages reading on gender issues, gender role stereotypes, gender inequality, how sexism is promoted, topical issues, for example, obsession with thinness, obsession with specific types of eating markers, power differentials between the sexes, assertiveness, coping skills, and more. Reading empowers the client and allows the client to make informed choices. Feminist gender analysis and intervention. When using this technique, the counselor will explore with the client to assist the client in understanding the impact of gender role expectations in his or her life and how social issues impact his or her personal issues. Feminist power analysis and power intervention. This technique involves assisting the client in the discovery of the power differences between the sexes in society, understanding the power the client possesses, and understanding how all individuals exercise power. Feminist reframing. The therapist will assist the client in altering the client's frame of reference for his or her own behavior, shifting from intrapersonal to interpersonal focus to define his or her issues. Feminist relabeling. The client is to alter the evaluation or label given to a behavior characteristic from a negative to a positive. For example, Jane begins to speak about herself as a strong, healthy woman with a great smile rather than inadequate in another way because she is not society's definition of it. Feminist self-disclosure. Disclosing to the client assists in equalizing the therapeutic relationship and provides models. General systems theory advocacy. The therapy will engage the necessary supports or assist the client when self-points cannot be overcome and present as a hindrance to the central work, including advocacy regarding unfair or outdated policy. General systems theory echo map. The therapist will draw this with the client to discover the social environment, conditions, circumstances, and interactions surrounding the client, which will enable the therapist to see the interactions with multiple systems, friends, politics, religious, educational, vocational that the client engages inputs and outputs. Draw the family household membership in the center circle, then engage the connecting systems with the appropriate lines, which will indicate strength and direction of the relationship, i.e., strong, tenuous, conflicted, one way. General systems theory reframing. The issue or problem is removed from the identified client and assigned as a family issue and becomes the focal point of the intervention. General systems theory tap into all systems. This technique considers informal or naturally occurring systems, for example, family, friends, format systems, governmental agencies, and societal systems, for example, schools and churches. Do they currently or did they historically exist within the system? Is the client engaging them appropriately? The therapist is temporary, but the client system is permanent. This involves raising awareness of where in the body feelings are associated through breathing techniques or reflected inconsistencies between verbal reports and body language. For example, the therapist may notice a client tense his shoulders each time he talks about his spouse. So the therapist assists the client in a breathing technique and enhances the client's awareness of his body. Functions to gain greater awareness and control. Gestalt therapy dream work. This technique does not involve the therapist interpreting or analyzing the dream. Rather, it assists the client in bringing the dream to life as if it were happening now with the client as part of the dream. The client details the dream with each entity, event, and mood, and then becomes each part. Parts that's selected and the